Recording is in progress. Hi, Nana. So we are going to be able. Recording in progress.
The computer is,
Started the meeting.
I started early because we have no computer.
Computer, right? So you need to turn off your microphone.
I did. I just did. Yeah, I did.
I'm going to need it again. Here we go. So I had to start with this. Start the meeting. So I guess you don't need a computer. I have played the computer for 5 days. I'm about as clean as you can get. I think about a cold. I don't have a mask. Oh, this is for you guys. No, I'm absolutely fine. I just,
Yeah.
I'm gonna take it off when I call. Yeah, but.
Good, thank you. I appreciate that because I actually can't understand people.
Yeah.
Off of the mask on.
I just wanted to be extra safe. I mean, I was so sick. I was so sick. How sick I got. Okay. So I'm gonna move this over here.
Yeah, I'm gonna log in.
And I keep that to the dance. Recording in progress. I know Wanda's coming.
You know, I saw that Denise Mia is gonna have a fire safe barbecue at Pastor. Right. I'm gonna get this address for you.
That was the best you could do.
Yeah, October 11th. 11 to 2.
Barbecue.
Yeah. That's cool. Gigi.
Hi. Hi. I am PCR today, 5th day negative, but I'm gonna just take the mask off when I speak, and then her husband got a cold. Okay. So we're just protecting you. All right, thank you. Okay. That's probably the healthy end, 'cause you're probably.
I know,
saying
right?
that. We probably all have it.
Exactly.
I'm sad. That's negative and had to be down. I don't want to give that. to
I'm so
anybody.
sorry.
No, it's fine. But it's, I don't want to do this one.
Oh my goodness. I stopped the video of myself.
My computer's shutting off. What is that? What does that mean?
Nobody in the town hall. Ooh, what's this over here? Is this just a-
Well, you have to be there, they can't have.
Oh, the
One more
committee
minute
is
and
there.
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
start.
there's no audience.
Oh,
Oh, well, you know what? There's something wrong with.
Here with you, goes for you. Oh, no, it's not all yours. Figured out the.
My internet's working great. Why?
Message from
This-
Sue.
Which one are you on, council chambers?
Oh, this is the meeting which is going on right now.
Yeah, council chambers.
Yeah, mine's working fine.
What's the,
Sound.
Oh, maybe I'm on my phone.
Announce
you
it
know,
over the
honestly.
internet. But the
I-
tax is right here.
I might be
Hey, guys.
using my phone.
I shouldn't announce that over the
Hey.
internet either.
I don't know that I actually really need it. I've got my.
And then she's got a mask. You're gonna be there?
Hey, Craig.
Greg,
Okay, Serena. She's on with her face.
I just got over.
Hello.
And negative for 5 days, but I'm just making sure.
I don't know who Sarah
my
Gil
son-
is.
My husband has a cold, and so I haven't caught it yet, but I didn't want to infect anyone.
Yeah, I had it and then I went negative and I went positive. So
MJ's husband has COVID.
abundance of caution sitting away from people.
She
Okay,
said-
I think I'm gonna call this, can people hear me? Craig, the computer is no longer here
Many presidents.
in the council chamber.
I can't hear you when you don't speak into the mic.
Yeah, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good, that answers my question.
Thanks,
Uh,
Irina.
'cause the-
Jason,
It's a little different technical setup and I wasn't sure. Okay, so I'm gonna call this meeting to order and it is 4:02.
That's her right there.
Right.
So the rest is remote.
Okay, MJ, are you okay on the notes?
Yeah.
Ready to go?
Yeah. you
Okay.
can-
used to be there.
I'm going to open oral communications for items not on the agenda. And first, I'd like to apologize for canceling last month. We had a couple of surprise travel issues come up and we didn't have a quorum.
Who else is there?
And of course, I want to extend our
Okay.
thoughts and prayers for the people
There
of
was somebody else
Maui.
before they
Oh,
couldn't-
somebody
Um,
walked in.
I think this is a great time for everybody to check out the Emergency Preparedness Committee's
up
new
here?
evacuation plan, their draft evacuation
Oh, so-
plan, because it's a very informative document.
You know, she's
Yeah.
in the-
And you can also check out our committee's website, Wildfire Preparedness
She's in the town hall.
Committee, and a look at how to prepare for evacuation, including how to make your go bag and how to sit down with your family and really plan out how you are going to get out of the house quickly. We can't emphasize enough, you do not want to wait for the evacuation warning. You want to, for the order, you want to get out when there's a warning. I know when we sat down, I ended up uploading to the cloud, not only important documents, but photos of family photos, pictures of mementos, all sorts of things so that we could get out of the house quickly. So I really encourage everyone to check out our website and learn how you can be prepared to evacuate quickly. So is there anyone else who has something to comment on that is not on the agenda? Oh, yes, Mona.
So I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention, if they haven't seen it already, that there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about PG&E's plan to scrap their tree trimming program because they've decided it doesn't work in terms of fire prevention. And I think that it would be good for our committee to discuss at some point, especially with Don Bullard or someone, what the implications of that are for fuel reduction locally.
Is that something we should put on the agenda in the future? Definitely. Do
Did
that.
did PG&E confirm that?
That's what I read. I mean, I haven't seen much coverage of it, so maybe other people know more about it than I do, but I've seen it in a few places now and that it confirmed, so I don't really know, but it, you know, and to be honest, I don't know how much of the tree trimming is really done by PG&E versus done by the town versus done by, you know, residents, but in terms of the right of way, I think that there could be implication.
Maybe we can ask Howard to show up at the
There you go.
next meeting
Watching it.
and discuss it.
Turn
because
this
we
on.
I had to because
Yes, and I've read the same thing, so that's absolutely correct. Okay, so there's no one else? Okay.
Yes,
Actually, there is.
yes, there is. You need to do a roll call. We cannot see who's present in the committee.
Thank you so much. Wanda we have everyone here. Wanda is in the audience. I think she wants to get a little distance from everyone. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Wanda is in the audience. Dee,
Present.
Nona,
Present.
MJ, and I'm here. So we have a quorum. I'm sorry, but thank you for
Can-
pointing that out.
Can you show the whole dais? We only see you and we see MJ separately. We cannot see the rest of you there.
Yeah, two of us are on our computers. That's why you see me and Jennifer, but I don't know how to.
You
Fred,
can
do
do
you-
that.
Sometimes when you talk, the
No, it
Nope.
doesn't. It only does for us
There,
individuals.
there. No,
Okay, that's better.
much better.
Wanda, wave your hand.
Oh,
That's
now
okay.
we,
Okay,
yeah,
we see it now.
now we're getting more than one camera.
Okay, good. Thank you.
But I don't know how you control that manually. Testing, testing. No, it didn't.
Okay, we're going to move to approval of the minutes for June 21st, 2023. And again, thank you, MJ, for another set of fantastic minutes. Can I see a show of hands for approval? Okay, let the record show.
People can't see it.
You want to, oh, I was just going to say, let the record show that they were approved unanimously. Okay. So new business, fire marshal updates, and Don's not here. So we're going to move on to discuss and begin to compile comments on draft ordinances. Yes. He comes when he's able to. Discuss and begin to compile comments on draft ordinances 2303, 2304, and 13, 2023, with an emphasis on collecting resident feedback. So, so first I'd like to point out that we were asked to collect feedback from residents by the fire district and our town council liaison, Craig Taylor. And I can guarantee you that this committee's previous comments about these ordinances are being discussed, and that any feedback we gather will be looked at very carefully by the fire district. I am actually okay if a Woodside resident or somebody from Los Trancos, so anyone from the fire districts makes a comment. I think that's just fine. And part of our task is going to be to figure out how to collect the feedback and summarize it, but I also want to preserve every individual comment so that when we give that feedback to the fire district and or the town council, we have both records of that. And I know that MJ is going to take very good notes during the meetings, and we need to give her time to make sure we get those notes taken. I'd like to step up awareness about this discussion, and I've asked MJ to emphasize communications this month that these ordinances, these draft ordinances are being reviewed and that we are seeking feedback. And then I am also going to work on an email, which I'll get approved by Carrie and Craig, that I plan to send out through my email list. And it's a pretty extensive list, and it worked pretty well during the wildfire fair to just let people know what's going on. I see this process of getting feedback going on through at least December, because we're probably going to see 2303 and 2304 maybe get a first reading in October, and then we've got that abatement citation still coming this year, and I think it will be important to get feedback on that. And we're going to still make time, because we need to discuss the importance of communication and improving communication about wildfire preparedness. And I know MJ and Dee are working on this in their subcommittee. And it's going to be more important than ever once these ordinances are passed to be able to have good communications with the community to educate them on these ordinances so that everyone can be in compliance. And I just want to address the committee members for a minute. I know this is not what we may choose to spend our time on over the next few months. Reading ordinances and writing memos is a bit tedious. But I did want to say that I personally feel that when I look at all the time I've spent on this committee, I think this may be the most important thing that I've done. While these ordinances will definitely make Portola Valley safer, they may also place a financial burden on certain residents. And they also could impact our efforts to conserve habitat if they're not implemented correctly. So this work is very important, and we are going to make a huge difference. I just think this is the best example of town governance and volunteerism working together that I can think of. And I know you're not going to get a lot of thank yous and a lot of recognition for this, but I want to thank you. And I just hope that you go home feeling really proud that you're part of this, because it's really important to get this feedback. Okay, so how we're going to do this is I'm going to split this discussion into two. Oh, and I want to talk about the agenda packet now. So in the agenda packet, you will find a copy of the drafts for 2303 and 2304. It may be hard to find them because I had to strip off the preamble, and I had to strip off the signature to get them in the packet. Also, there's a copy of 13/20/23, a copy of Dee and MJ's very good memo and comments about 2023, as well as Fire Marshal Don Bullard's response to that memo. And then we got two emails from residents with comments about 2303 and 2304 that remind me we should look at, because I think that they were some interesting comments. And then also in that document is a draft. I started kind of a summary of where we are right now with our comments about these ordinances. And then I left a placeholder for resident comments, and this will grow, but I just kind of wanted this document as a beginning. Okay, how I'm going to do this is we're going to split the discussion into two parts. First, we're going to look at 13/20/23. And then we're going to look at 2303 and 2304. For each of the sections, I'm just going to give like a 1-minute review for people at home so that they can remember where we're at and what these ordinances are. Then we'll have a committee discussion with a focus on any concerns we still have and any actions that we want to talk about. Then we'll take comments from attendees. Please remember, we really can't have a discussion with attendees. We are listening to feedback. We can, after we get that feedback as a committee, discuss things we may want to put on the agenda for next meeting, but you know, we have to stick to our agenda item, which is to take feedback. And then, so we'll do one part, then we'll do the next, and then we can discuss maybe how to summarize feedback in the future and any other steps we want to do. So is there any questions so far? Just from the committee? We're good? Okay. So let me see if I can share my screen. All right, we're going to start by discussing draft ordinance 13, 2023, which amends the 2022 California Fire Code. As I read the minutes, my understanding is it had a second reading on July 25th at the Fire District's board meeting. But was it that the first meeting? Was that the first reading? They definitely had a reading. Was it the first reading? Dee? I think so. Okay. I'm gonna blame COVID brain fog. So. So if the Fire District Board passes this draft ordinance, because this is amending the fire code, the town of Portola Valley has a choice of either ratifying, modifying, or denying the ordinance. If they deny it, my understanding is it reverts to whatever the California Fire Code is. This committee has already taken a couple of actions. Dee and MJ wrote that very good memo with comments about 13/20/23, and then Fire Marshal Bullard very quickly gave a very thorough response. So let's talk about the committee. I'll just stop sharing. Dee and MJ, I think you're going to probably end up directing this conversation. So how did you feel about the comments you received from Dawn, and what, where are we with this?
Well, Dee and I met on Monday and went over his feedback, and Dee is going to summarize.
Well, just stepping back, you know, I think this ordinance is dramatically different than ordinance 12. And I think that that was where we were starting from, is why, you know, why is it so much larger in scope? And why are there new sections that point out things that the other ordinance didn't? And we have very specific examples, if you can see. One, I wanted to make sure that they, you know, that we did do our due diligence of going through each point. And it's a long and kind of cumbersome ordinance. And so I think that, you know, Don's response, I do appreciate his response. It felt like the most common answer that he told us is that this is reasonable and not arbitrary. This is based on their experience. We were asking for sources of why this was included and where this wording came from. Didn't really see those. It was really just more of a blanket statement of, this is based on our experience. This is not unreasonable. This is not arbitrary. And I respect Don, and I respect the experience that they have. We're just kind of asking for sources, and is this necessary? When anytime a document grows 4 times in size, I think it's important to kind of go through that. So I didn't see anything. There were a couple of, there were a couple points of, yes, we repeated this, and yes, the punctuation was wrong. He did cite a source for traffic. I appreciated that. But most of our answers were, most of his answers were, this is based on our experience and this is what we want. My bigger concern is really just, I guess my question is, are we making a substantial change from the authority and the implications of this new ordinance? Has in the past, has the fire district had this type of authority to come in, make assessments, give penalties? And I think that that's one of the concerns, me as a private resident, as well as some of the feedback that I've heard from other folks. I just think that that deserves some discussion, and that people really understand what we're looking at. I don't have any specific responses to his response. I think it's all, he did answer each one of our bullet points. MJ, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a second. Yeah, I mean, he is being very, very generous and polite, which is not my style, but he did answer each one of our bullet points, but his answer is this pat answer of, it's based on our experience. He doesn't cite any scientific sources. And some of these things I think do require scientific backup, at least for us as homeowners. So, and then there were a few things where we asked specific questions where he didn't actually answer them. And so I guess I would like to know, how are we going to get him to really give us, credible answers that we can trust? Because I don't feel that I can trust what he has given us.
So am I allowed under, Craig, under the Brown Act to ask you a question because you're the town council liaison? Okay, so I am very clear about 2303 and 2304. I'm very clear what this committee could do and what I want it to do. I'm very clear about that. But with the building code, the fire code, I'm less clear because the planning department is going to, this is going to go to the town council, and the planning department, we have experts and they're going to weigh in. And we've made our comments. We're less than satisfied with the answers. Do you have any guidance for us for what the town council, how much the town council would like us to pursue this? Because I think this is very different than the other ordinances.
Sure. So I know that the planning department, so the planning director, just to be more specific, and the town attorney have met with Don and discussed this, and I know he's made some changes where they had some concerns. My sense is, Don's trying to do the right thing here. I don't think he's trying to intentionally be bureaucratic. And, it might be worth saying, hey, Don, this is how it feels to us, just to see what kind of response you get. And it may be just like, look, I'm a professional and you're not, and this is the way it is. And that's okay. And if that's his line, then what I guess I would recommend is when this comes to the council, that not just that you give a set of questions, but that you list as a committee, you list the concerns, because that's the useful thing for the council, is that, this thing comes through a series of committees and gets vetted. And to the degree that the questions get answered, that's awesome, because then we don't have to figure it out. But if you still feel like it, it's like Don doesn't have any more answers and isn't willing to go any further, then then I think you list the concerns of, da, 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 da. And then when it comes to council, I mean, we will have the authority at that point to either get answers or potentially not approve it and just fall back, like you said, on the California code. But I'd like ideally not to do either of those, right? I mean, ideally, I do think that, Don's goal is to make us safer. I mean, I really fundamentally believe that, he's not just being a bureaucrat here. So I would like to understand, because I think for Don, he gets this long list of questions and he's like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do with all this stuff? And so maybe we can help him by maybe walking through it a little bit more. Like, specifically, like, our concern was this, and maybe it didn't come out in a short, brief question. So I think that's the next thing I would recommend, if you can do that, is maybe have, a subcommittee just go meet with Don and say, hey, thanks for answering these things, but, on these ones where you sort of gave us the stock answer, could we talk a little bit more and see where he comes out? That would be my recommendation. Obviously, I'm not representing the council here. I'm representing just, a person who's been in town committees, et cetera, for a long time. And the value of the town committees is to flesh this stuff out. And if you can't, then just list your concerns. And as a council member, I'm certainly going to read, whatever final list of concerns that you guys provide when it gets to us. So does that help?
Yeah, and to be clear, you're our town council liaison, so when you speak, yeah, I'm kind of thinking you do represent the town council. So, and thank you. I think that was a really great answer.
Yeah, what I would
And-
say is I'm here to be helpful. I can give you a sense for the council. I'm certainly not giving you the opinion. Like the council, if it comes to the council, they may go, yeah, what are these wildfire preparedness people? Like, why are they bothering us? I mean, so, but I mean, I doubt that. I'm being a little bit, snarky here, but all I'm saying is just, I am a council member.
Well, also you're the voice for our committee to the council. Right?
Yes.
And that's the main
Yes.
reason I think that's my understanding of one of the reasons you're here.
Yes.
So, I trust that you took a look at our comments or will look at our comments and see for yourself, like I understand. And I agree with you. I know that Don, I really do. I trust Don and I, respect him, and he does have a lot of years of experience. And I understand that what my understanding of his response is, we are in dire times and, things need to happen because of climate change. Like I get that. So I just want to make sure, you're hearing us, and if that sparks something for you, that you'll take that to the council, right? Like, why has this quadrupled in size? Why, do we need all of these? Do we really need all of these words, and where are those words coming from, right? Like that's the thing that was really the question that we were asking, is that there's this very huge description. And it's not that I'm immediately saying that the description's false. I'm just curious
Sure.
where that's coming and why it's in there.
So again, I think the thing I'd recommend is that a subcommittee, it may be you and MJ again. I'm happy to go with you. I mean, let's just go, like I'm gone between now and the 28th. So it would have to be sometime after that, but I'm happy to go over, because I've been doing that with Don. I've been meeting with him regularly once a month and just say, hey, I got some questions. And it's easier for Don to talk through what's going on than I
Totally
need to-
understand.
Right. And so I think that's what I would recommend as the next step.
Okay.
Then I feel if you don't get satisfaction, then let's talk and we can figure out what's appropriate to take to the council.
Nona, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think what would help me is to have, and maybe this is in the preamble that you had to remove, but some kind of finding of fact that prompted the expansion of this. And, maybe it's like a NIST report, or maybe it's, some other kind of experience, just so we have a better understanding, first of all, of where this is coming from, and can educate ourselves and the community about why it's so dire and how it's so dire. But also, I think it might help this committee to know what the reaction was of the planning director, so that we understand that we're all, how to all be on the same page in terms of feedback, because that's where it really comes, where it's going to come down.
And the
right?
preamble was only removed for 2303 and 2304 because they're a draft of a draft. But the 13/20/23, since it's already been
Red.
read, it's complete. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you, Fred.
Yeah, and
Let's-
just an answer to the part. I think what you guys are trying to tease out is how do we justify this to the residents, right? And I think that's very valuable. So let's continue down that path. I think that's a good path. And I think Don will be receptive to that because he wants the residents to not only comply, but to accept this and help move it along in a positive way. So I think this is just part of that effort. Thank you.
So why don't we see if there's any comments from our attendees, and then we'll come back to the conversation. So does anyone in the attendees have any comments? Okay, so we have one, two,
Just 7.
do we? Why don't I see all 7? Okay.
Well, 7 includes you. and
Yeah,
me.
yeah, no, we don't have 7.
Um,
Um,
4 in addition to.
So we've got a couple of options. We could certainly have the subcommittee meet with Dawn, with or without Craig. And I do want to comment on D, your comments, knowing you as I know you. I know you well. and I appreciate your comments. They're very insightful, and I know how thoughtful you were when you made them. So you could meet with Dawn. I want to make sure if you meet with Dawn and you have a discussion that we're getting official responses. So it's not just a conversation you're having and you feel better about this and then we're moving on. There is a benefit of having a written question and having a written response.
Right.
We could also, we've given our comments. He's given his responses. We could wait until it passes and see what's actually passed. And then we could give very similar comments that you gave to the town council and say, you know, we feel that these questions still have to be answered. And then the building departments or the town council can get those answers, and they could call you in if they needed help deciphering those questions. I would imagine the building, the planning department has expertise, maybe not as expert as you are, but they would feel free to contact you. So
Sure.
that's a second option.
I mean, I do appreciate the acknowledgement that this is an ongoing process, right? Like, and I've seen some changes that they've been making, you know, back and forth, and I, you know, have it on good faith that he'll continue to be doing that. So I think it's important that we do, you know, keep at this until we have the final reading and really see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Right. So that I appreciate you bringing that this is still in a process of editing.
Right.
Right.
And there's going to be, after that's approved, the town council is going to have to decide on it. And then a memo from our committee, I think, would be taken, be looked at very seriously by the town council. It is surprising that it would grow, this document would grow that much, but you know, I leave it to you and MJ, who are much more expert in this area. I don't really feel I have the expertise to weigh in too much on this. And I'm much more comfortable with expanding fire codes for remodels because that's a big investment, and it makes sense to me that you would improve a building and fire safety of a building when you do those big remodels. I'm much more comfortable with that idea because that's something you can plan for, and we want to get houses up to. Yeah, well, I'll come back after that, but I'm a little uncomfortable that there are so many questions in both of your minds.
So did you want an opinion on these two options?
Or is there a third option that we should take? I mean, what do we want to do about this? Do you want to, and I will come back to the attendees before we take a vote. Do you want to meet with Dawn and try to pursue this further privately? Do you want to send another memo now to say we're not satisfied with this? Or do you want to wait? He's gotten our comments. We've gotten his response. Let's see if he changes something in the final draft and what they pass, and then we can write a memo at that time to the town council. What do you want to do?
Well, my preference is that we meet with Dawn and I can take copious minutes so that I can write down all of his answers and then we can, present that to the committee. I think it's a lot tougher for us if we just wait for the board to pass something and then expect the town council to stand up and oppose it based on our input later on. I think the sooner we nip this in the bud, the better.
Do you?
Yeah,
agree?
I agree. And I'd be willing to meet with you and Don.
And I don't think,
I think that having Craig is essential.
so let's, okay, so let's, yeah.
So thank you, MJ. I was going to say something very similar. So one thing I've been doing in my meetings is I write up notes from the meeting. I send them to Don and say, Don, does this seem like I captured the meeting? He says, yes. And that's because we're not trying to create a legal record here. We're trying to create look, we had these conversations, Don acknowledged this stuff. And if you need to bring those notes to the council because we get there, so be it. So he's been very open to that. So that I think has worked very well. I've just been taking it back. And then the other point you made, I think it's the right one, is once this goes through the fire board, if it comes to the council and we don't approve it, then it's either this messy process that has to go all the way back and loop into the fire board and they have to agree on the changes and come back, or we end up not approving it and we default to the state. And that's going to be a tough decision for the council. So the more you guys can bring this to the forefront, the better would be my view. Thank you.
Well, one question about that though. So I never understood what is the board process? Like there's a first and second hearing and then they vote. So is the vote, do you know when the vote is scheduled?
They do
for?
not need to have a second process. I've checked their minutes back as far as they go, and it's variable.
Right.
Once they-
So they can waive a first reading, second reading. I'm not sure exactly, but they can definitely have a reading and then I think waive the second reading. I mean, there is stuff they can do. They don't necessarily have to do that. They can follow a normal process. And I don't know, I mean, I haven't been able to pin down exactly when this is going to get finalized. So that's why I guess I'm suggesting that, maybe somebody just reach out to Don and say, hey, Don, here's what we'd like to do. When is this going to get approved? Because we want to make sure we have a chance to talk with you beforehand and see what he has to say. I mean, again, there's only so much we can influence the department's policy, their process, but to the degree we can be informed, that would be valuable. Thank you.
And I thought that they were scheduling a public hearing, which would be one of their board meetings, a public hearing on this ordinance, right?
That's my understanding as well, but you'd have to check with Don. I mean, he's going to know for sure. And I find it very difficult to log into their website and try to figure out exactly what's going on. But
Yeah.
generally, if I ask Don, okay, when's this going to come up for a reading? And, what's the implication? He's been pretty open. I don't feel like he's hiding the process. He just understands it better than I have to date.
Okay, so Serena.
A very mundane questions. I don't know all of the people. What is the name of the council member who was speaking?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It is our town council liaison, Craig Taylor.
Greg Taylor.
Craig Taylor.
And the woman who obviously wrote up the memo with MJ.
Oh,
Her-
Dee Bailey. Okay, so Dee Bailey is she's a former contractor, and she's also a somewhat expert in permaculture, which is, I'm going to make a fool of myself. It's the marriage of fire safety, conservation, and melding earth and culture.
It's a
and
design
safety together.
system.
It is
It's
an
just a design system
amazing
for
design
ecosystems.
system.
Yeah.
And Nona here is our liaison.
Nona, I
to the
know.
You know Nona. MJ Wanda Jenner in the audience is a owner of a CPA company and are the brains of our committee. And I'm Jennifer Hammer. I'm the chair.
I have figured out. I just didn't know some of the others. So thank you for filling me in.
So let's take okay, so would someone like to propose a motion where we vote on having D and MJ meet, contact Dawn, meet with Dawn, preferably with Craig, and then write up minutes to present to us, hopefully before the next meeting. Would someone like to propose? I think you. Okay, she proposed that. Okay, so
MJ and Craig, and then as in agreement, that that's what
right, so let's give MJ a chance to write that up and read it back to us, and then we'll vote on it. Okay, do you want me to write it, or do you want me to? Say it?
No, I'm still typing, but I wasn't typing in good English.
That's fine. That's okay. Okay, so we're going to vote on it. The motion before us. Yes.
Um, If we have questions we would like this subcommittee to address to Dawn, can we get them to the subcommittee members before they meet?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Do you
somebody's
have,
going to tell us how to do that, right?
well, do it right now.
Not right now.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we already did that, but yeah, if you have more comments about 13/20/23, yeah.
Yeah, the
She
big one
could
is,
just- Couldn't she just email them to the public comment thing so it doesn't become a Brown Act issue?
Oh, yes.
very good, thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And email that to the Wildfire Prep. It'll be on the board in a few minutes. Okay, so what we're going to vote on is that Dee Bailey and MJ Lee are going to reach out to Dawn Bullard and set up a meeting and pursue these questions, and then document that meeting with notes and follow up with Dawn to get the approval of those notes. Does that sound good?
including Craig.
And yes, so obviously, if they can include Craig, they're going to include Craig. All set? Okay, so show of hands, approval?
Do I write down that you're making the motion?
No, this is Nona. I'm just repeating what Nona suggested. That was Nona making the
Oh, okay.
motion. Nona made the motion. I was just
And who
repeating what she
seconded?
said.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay. Show of hands. Okay, great. Boom. We're off.
Craig, are you going to be the one to set this meeting up or one of us? can set it up? Okay. And you said you're not available until after July 28th? Oh, August. What month are we in? Oh.
Is that, I think that's plenty of time, right?
Yeah, unless they're doing the public hearing at the end of August.
Kind of too late then.
In that case, I guess it's all moot.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to draft ordinance 2303 and 2304. Couple of things I want to point out. First of all, these ordinances are still being modified. The text will change. Now, these ordinances actually, as I've gone through in the past, have a history. They were different ordinances that have been severely modified. Even though they were introduced last year, they still have to have a new first reading before they are voted on. I know this from reading the minutes of the fire committees or fire board. So these will have a first reading before the board votes on them. But these are very, very early drafts. We know that Dawn has taken input already from the Conservation Committee, from Stanford, from Midtown. And I also just want to point out that everyone has the same goal. It's to make Portola Valley safer. And I think that we can also all agree that in general, these ordinances are moving in the direction we need to move. I think that we have some concerns about the speed and the method. And we have some conservation concerns, but you know, we're all moving in the same direction. And I think we need to keep that in mind. To my knowledge, the way that the public can provide input is they could go to a fire board meeting and speak for 3 minutes at the beginning. They can come to our meeting and give feedback. They can go to a town council meeting and speak at the beginning of the meeting for 3 minutes. But I really do think one of the best ways to do it is to email our committee at wildfireprepcommittee@portolavalley.net and give your input. And please don't email me personally. It's going to be much more effective. And I did actually, because I had COVID brain fog, I did accept those emails that are in the agenda packet, but it would really be better if you emailed the committee. And I would encourage anyone who is concerned about these ordinances to start an email chain and get this information out so that their friends will also comment. I think it is very likely that the fire district will not do the first reading or vote on these till at least October. I want to emphasize the town does not need to ratify these. This is not a fire code. Therefore, when the fire board votes on this, that it will be like the citation ordinance they passed. It will become an ordinance. And so if we want to comment, we need to comment before they vote. And we have begun, this committee has begun a list of concerns about these ordinances, and that's in our past minutes as well as in this agenda packet. The 2303 Defensible Space and Fuel Mitigation Ordinance creates a zone 0 for new and existing homes. That's basically 0 to 5 feet around your structure. It does include some new requirements for roadside vegetation mitigation. It's my understanding from talking to Howard that this would not include anything, this would not impact the row project. He did not think that this new requirement would require the town to spend more money than it's already planning to spend on that right-of-way project. It also includes a requirement that before close of escrow on the sale of any parcel, the seller must have complied with 2303. One of our questions are, what does that mean? Can you do an escrow holdback? You know, how is that going to work? Draft ordinance 2304, I'm calling it the fuel break ordinance. Basically, it indicates that for any property of less than an acre, the whole property becomes a fuel break. If you have more than an acre, 50 feet around the perimeter becomes a fuel break. And if you have more than 10 acres, a fuel break of 100 feet is required around the perimeter. I have a definition of what a fuel break is. And if you have contiguous parcels, then that perimeter is just around both of the parcels that are connected. I do also want to point out a reminder that we did have in November of last year, the ordinance passed that was the administrative citation process, which means that the fire district has a new authority to cite and fine homeowners for violations of fire code, and that we expect a future ordinance this year where they can start an abatement process, which would mean that they could bring workers after notifying you, they could bring workers onto your property, they could do the work, bring you up to compliance, and then they would submit that bill. My understanding is that they, from other presentations Dawn has given, that their plan is to submit that bill to the county, and it would be collected as a taxable event. It would not be a lien, which is another way that sometimes this is done, but this would be a taxable event. Okay, so that is where we are. Yes.
Just one quick comment on that last thing and then a broader comment. Certainly a taxable lien means it's payable that year versus a lien just means that you pay it off when you sell the property. So that's a significant difference. The other thing that I've talked to Don about, and I would recommend this committee and the Conservation Committee start thinking about, is a set of guidelines. Because one thing that, these ordinances are kind of black and white. I mean, they're legal documents, et cetera. And I've talked to Don about, how do we show homeowners what it means, what it looks like, so that they're not thinking it's scorched earth and you just, plow everything around your house to 5 feet. And he's very open to that. I don't think the department's going to write that document, but if the appropriate committees did write that document, I think he'd be very, the department would be very open to making the appropriate comments and then going to homeowners and taking those guidelines out with them and saying, when we ask you to comply, here are some examples. And so I think it much similar to the design guidelines and the lighting, lighting, et cetera, that we have in our design guidelines as a way of getting people a little better handle on, that it can be low and well watered and some of the things that aren't immediately obvious when you read the ordinance. Thank you.
So I'm just going to start with a comment because it piggybacks on this pretty well. My biggest concern is that I talk to a lot of homeowners, and I am concerned that there are some residents that are simply not going to be able to afford to get this work done in a year's time. And I could tell specific stories. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of new, people are struggling to comply with the current codes. My other concern is the logistics, and I'm thinking about people whose property is on like a steep ravine, and there's habitat. And so all of a sudden now you have to create a 50-foot perimeter. You have to get rid of dead trees. So I've got concerns about how is that tree permit process even going to work, because no one can get down there because it's covered with poison oak. Do we have contractors that we can recommend that are going to know how to clear that in a way that they're going to know if there's a stream or there's a special habitat to stay away from that? People are not going to be willing to pay. We're talking tens and tens of thousands of dollars to clear. I cleared a little tiny slope in the ranch when I moved in, and I had to do a clearing because it was near a stream, and it was $20,000. We're talking a small little patch because it had 20 years left to pay. $20,000, because you got to have somebody by hand clearing things, because then they have to know what they're doing, because there's habitat there. And now we're talking a steep, let's say, ravine. And is the fire district going to come out to these homeowners and talk to that contractor? How do we have a list of contractors we trust? And can we say to residents, no, you can't bring in a machine that can work on that slope and just clear everything really quickly? No, you have to pay, 20 times more to have it done by hand. There's a lot of logistics here beyond just writing a handbook. And the people that haven't cleared their property are either they can't afford it because there's so much tree work, or it's overwhelming because it's hard to get to. Yeah, Craig, why don't you wait until there's public comment? So other committee members?
I share a lot of those concerns. I also know that John, you have been really open to getting pretty specific feedback from conservation on, sort of what are the qualitatives, like get rid of eucalyptus, and what are the quantitatives, like no, it has to be down to a foot, not 2 feet. I mean, there are, it's important, I think, for all of us to try and think about how we think of our properties and also help inform other people how to look at their property and say, oh, that's a high priority concern. That should be my first worry. And this one, that one comes next. And I think one of the reasons that's so complicated right now is that there is somewhat conflicting guidance. And there are 3 areas where I think that is most prominent to me on the Conservation Committee. One is the question of mulch. Mulch it can burn, it's fuel, but it also keeps moisture in the ground, it keeps the vegetation less drought stricken, right? So what's the fine point where you sort of say, okay, this is the right amount of mulch for keeping the habitat and the plants healthy, and that would be too much because then it's really more likely to carry a fire. That's one example. I think that the shaded fuel break is actually another important question because you want to shade the ground in order to keep things cool and keep a nice, sort of microhabitat in the understory. But on the other hand, then you have connectivity potentially between interlocking canopies. And so that's a continuous fuel. There are a lot of questions like that we on our different committees potentially are telling people different things. And we need to sort of figure out, how to balance those things to get the best out and save people money and protect the things they value the most about their
So Nona, have you ever read the ranch guidelines?
Have I what?
Have you ever read the ranch guidelines, the Portola Valley ranch guidelines?
Not for a while.
Okay. But they're very detailed.
Yeah.
And I am not stupid. You might, for most people, don't think I'm stupid. And I moved into the ranch and I read those things and I'm a gardener. And I was so confused. And I'm looking at these plants and I'm looking at the pictures and I'm going, is that the plant? Because they change through the season. And it was really hard and I couldn't find any experts to help me. And that now I know because I'm on this committee. I almost wonder if besides a handbook, and I do think if we do any handbook, it should be an official handbook for the district. I don't think we should waste time just doing Portola Valley. If they want us to do a handbook, it should be a joint venture for the whole district. But I almost feel like we have to have a little volunteer committee because you're going to also have huge tree requests of a whole bunch of dying trees. And people are going to say, well, what do you mean? How do I do a tree permit? And we want to do a fast track system. I have it all set up. I just need to coordinate with the fire district about how to fast track. But to have maybe someone from this committee, have someone on the conservation committee, you make an appointment and they just go out for a couple hours and they help a homeowner. Because I just have a feeling that we're just going to have homeowners that just don't know how to approach this unless it's just take everything out so I don't get fined.
Yeah, I actually think that having demonstration yards would be a valuable thing where people can say, well, this is what I did. And I think it helps because of the following. And then that sort of stimulates people to say, okay, well, how would I apply that to my yard?
Yeah. Again, kind of zooming out, I would hope that this committee and the fire district can work together in being effective, right? Like I understand there's a need for enforcement in extreme cases, but I think that it's really important for people to understand that it does take time and it takes time to invest those monies and everybody has a different formula for risk and investment. I mean, it really comes down to resources of time and money. And I think I love this idea of, when you said a demonstration garden, but I also would like the idea maybe, or want to propose the idea of, when the fire district makes an assessment of your home, that that they're a partner in helping you create this plan. Instead of coming down, I understand there has to be a carrot and a stick, but I think the carrot right now, where we are in our community of trying to work together as a whole, of what is a reasonable 1-year plan or 5-year plan, based on your budget and your resources and those kinds of things. Whereas other people, like if you really look at these words and they say removal of all combustible material. Well, no, like oak duff is something that is important to the oak trees, and that's combustible. Every plant is combustible, and we don't want, there's so many reasons why we do not want to just clear erosion and microorganisms and building soil. If you really want to think about it, like oak trees are one of the best ways to combat climate change. They are drought tolerant, they're native, they provide shade, they provide all of this ecosystem. And that's where we are. We're in this wilderness urban interface, and we need our oak woodlands, and we need to protect those oak woodlands. That comes in direct conflict with some of the way that these ordinances are written. And so, I don't know what the answer is, but I would hope that we can stress to them that we need to have both. We need to feel like they're partners with us, and how to get there, right? Like we all have the same intention of taking care of the community. But the way that some of these ordinances are written, it seems very extreme. And again, if this is law, now's our time to talk about that. Why are we writing removal of all combustible material? That is not, every plant can combust. That in my opinion, that seems like an extreme way to write this. So
I agree with everything you said. I think because of budgeting constraints, I don't think that the fire district itself, I think they'd love to have the budget where they could come and spend 3 hours with every citizen. I don't think they're going to have the budget to do much more than, write up what you need to do. I have been told by our town council liaison that Dawn is considering our suggestion that people be allowed to submit a 5-year plan. And I cling to that idea. And that again, if we could come up with some kind of maybe little joint committee that could go out to homeowners, that could be something that we could say, this is a template that you can use. It's very similar to Firewise when you think about it, because Firewise volunteers are trained on how to assess a home and things like that. It would be a fairly straightforward process, I think, if we could get the volunteers to do it, for a couple of us to go out to somebody's house and just once and say, okay, this is how you do this, and this is how you do this, and it, these are the trees that do need to be removed or trimmed in a certain way. And then we may have to actually come up with a list of perhaps not trusted contractors, but happy contractors, friendly
Informed.
contractors, informed contractors. Yeah. Wanda, do you have anything to add? So to Dee's point about how these are written, these ordinances are written, we didn't do a real detailed critique because we thought we might have a new draft. And this is the draft that Dawn said, this is what you can give to people. So one option would be for us to spend the month to, because I know we all have so much time to go through these ordinances, which are shorter than the 13, 20, 23, and actually start to critique the actual language, very specific comments. And then next month, and you can either send those to me, I can compile the document like I did with the safety element, we can review it next month and then send it. But I'm kind of hesitant to wait until the next version comes out, because the next version could come out and
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So has conservation sent their comments to Don? And
So we did a text edit on this draft
3 and
And-
4?
and in the preamble and changed the language about the chaparral biome, a lot of things. But also we added definitions for things like mulch
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and we redefined weed and we redefined,
Good.
hazardous vegetation, things. Not in dramatically different ways, but in ways that are sort of small but significant, that recognize that there's some nuance in a lot of these things. And my understanding is that Don is going to look at those and see how much they can be incorporated. But they're not in the draft.
Okay,
yet.
that was my, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Because again, I rely on our conservation committee. They're our experts in that way, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll just trust that he's taking that into account. And if he gets it, if our comments are double, then maybe that just is an emphasis point for him. If I come up with the same thing or that MJ comes up with, that Wanda comes up with, that's okay, right?
And I understand, Nona, you probably don't want to participate because you've already participated once.
It's a little complicated because Don is technically on our subcommittee, and so I think it would be confusing, at least to me.
Uh-huh. Sure.
What if we sent, instead of our compiling these comments, what if we sent them all to Nona to compile them, or to add them to the conservation committee? subcommittee?
Because this committee has been authorized to provide feedback, and I'd like to think that by next month, we're going to have a ton of comments from residents, because we're going to start sending emails.
And asking for, right? You're asking for
Yes,
comments.
yes.
Soliciting
Yes,
comments.
and I
Okay.
think conservation has a different mission than wildfire preparedness. So I
Sure.
think our comments will be very different. We talk about feedback. We did get two really interesting emails. I really appreciate people that sent those, and both of them are pointing out confusion between wording, redundancies, well, if this is true and this is true, then how could this be true? It does seem like there's going to have to be a lot of explanation once these are written, but I agree with Dee. I think we have to get to this destination. I'm just a little concerned that a 1-year time frame has been listed as that's how long they're giving people. And I would feel a lot better if I knew that we were really going to have that option for a 5-year plan for people. I have a friend on Westridge that's taken down almost $100,000 worth of trees. They just have so many dying trees. How are you going to do that if you're a young married couple and you just moved in?
And there's also benefit of leaving some of those snags, right? Like that's not an automatic conclusion that you take out. That's the
I
other
think they
thing.
would get the look.
Oh, okay.
They were flammable trees. Okay, so let's see if there's any comments from attendees. I think these are the people that have actually commented. Yes, Serena.
You're muted, Serena.
So one, I was wondering whether the comments from the Conservation Committee and from the Wildfire Preparedness Committee, when those would be visible by somebody else, are they visible now and I haven't known the right place to look, or are they not?
So our comments for this committee, the memo that we sent our town council liaison and our town manager was in our agenda packet a couple months ago, and those comments are essentially verbatim what is in the document that I included in this agenda packet. So you can.
Okay.
That is where we are right now with our official comments.
I think she's asking about the conservation.
She
subcommittee.
she asked about
Yeah.
both. So conservation, when will those comments be?
So those comments went to Don, I think in April, and they haven't been circulated beyond the subcommittee yet. And I think that's because our understanding was that, you know, Don needs to respond to them first. But, maybe we could revise that.
Be nice to have them in your agenda packet, maybe next month, so we could see them. You could run it by the chair.
Okay, I will bring that up at conservation meets next week, and I will bring that up.
Because that would be nice for our feedback cycle to know what conservation has said.
Yeah, one of the ones that we've been struggling with is this idea of mulch, you know, is are we talking about using gravel basically as mulch so that we have stone up against the house? And if you do that, do you put fabric cloth underneath that? I mean, what is the appropriate way to harden and yet insulate plants?
You know, at our wildfire fair, there was a vendor who was coming out with fireproof mulch. And I think it was Ember Defense that was going to be selling it. There was a new type of mulch that's.
I appreciate your comment. And I just want to say, you know, so many of these situations are really site specific. It's the challenge for Don and conservation and us is that every single parcel has its own unique qualities and plants and established trees. And that's why it really does take kind of a one-on-one walking through and looking at your situation. It's really hard to write guidelines that cover everything. You know, it's I just am showing thank you for your comment and showing empathy that it is a difficult challenge for all of us, really.
Yes, and Serena was one of the people I think that sent in an email. We would really appreciate that. But if it's site specific, but it's part of the ordinance, when an inspector goes out to a property, it really depends on the inspector and how he interprets those
Absolutely.
ordinances. So
Absolutely.
you can't, I mean, even though we go out and we counsel a homeowner, you could get an officer.
There's a
that
lot of
goes out
variation.
and-
That's right. Same thing happens in the building trades as well, right? They do their best to write the building code. But when it comes down to it, it's the day that your inspector walks on your job site and with his experience or her experience makes a ruling. And it's really site specific. I mean, that is the challenge. It's just what I'm trying to acknowledge, that there is a challenge of getting all of this information written in a way that applies, but also leaves some variation for your specific site. There has to be.
Are they trying to do too much? Do we need fewer things that are mentioned, or do you do that with a variation saying, okay, mulch can be somewhere between this or that? Or how do you do that then?
I don't have all the answers. I have great questions, but I don't have the answers.
Well, I can tell you as far as zone 0, they're saying no combustibles, but you could have low plants. So actually, in answer to your question, Serena, fabric liners for that gravel area is probably, you know, not within the standard.
And when CAL FIRE comes out with their zone 0, is that going to take precedent over this? Or-
Yeah, I mean, basically Don's ordinance refers to the state zone 0.
And when is that coming out?
Well, that's than taking.
Okay, but even
So-
in that example, isn't there also an exception for irrigated? Right? So yes, there is. There's an exception for it for irrigated.
Yeah.
And Don's.
And I think that there has to be.
Well, in John's there might be, but.
Oh.
But this is based on the old ordinances. This is not to the new zone 0.
Wow. Does that include planter boxes, like a freestanding planter that you have near your
Right,
house?
if it's wood,
Oh, but if it's a stone planter box and there's a
Well,
plant in it next to your house?
and the plant in it has to be wood.
I mean, again, and I think he said, we want folks to understand the spirit of this and the intention of these ordinances. There has to be, the wording has to be in a way that allows people to make site-specific determinations.
Yeah,
That's
and
my opinion.
the state tries to do that with their regulation, because they like to say, this is the minimum requirement, and
Uh-huh.
then they leave it to the fire district or the inspector to make it tougher. You know, so they do try to keep it at the minimum.
Makes sense.
Okay, Serena.
Another, you mentioned earlier in your discussion, the importance of prioritization with this. And I think that's one of the ways that makes this potentially, that you can tackle it. From the reading that I've done, it sounds like first prioritization is to harden your structure. And the second prioritization is that 0 to 5 foot zone. And after that, it gets fuzzier. And the new one that's in that makes a lot of sense, that fire trucks need to be able to get in there safely. So you need to keep things back from where they're going to travel. But after that, what you read is described differently, has different, the impact of the conflict between the habitat aspects and the get much more complicated. But is it a valid conclusion on my part that the priority is first the structure, then the 5 feet?
I mean, it depends on who you're talking to, but I always hear the first thing is defensible space. It's the first thing the fire district will tell you. There's very little home hardening that is required.
But as far as prioritization,
Well-
I think she's correct in thinking, you're going to start where you are and go outward is what I'm hearing from your general comment. So I would say the 0 to 5 in conjunction with home hardening is your first priority. So you want to see, where you're actually standing, what's gonna catch. And there's a lot of low hanging fruit that you can do as far as home hardening, the vents and,
Yes.
taking out the tree limbs that are over and cleaning the leaf, debris out of your gutters. So you're absolutely right. You're looking at it, from home central and outward. And then it does get fuzzier as to what's the most priority in the second zone and third zone.
I'm so sorry, Serena. I thought you were talking about like ordinances, like what is the priority via.
No,
fire district ordinance.
as you're talking about any sort of guideline or handbook as a way to look at it.
Yeah, your action plan, right? Just start
Yes.
where you live and work from there.
Right,
Yeah, get the vents installed, clean your decks, clean those dried leaves between your
right.
decks. Make sure those dried leaves are away from your house. Absolutely, he's absolutely correct. But then again, we look at this. Yes, no.
I think that one thing that would be helpful is when we have these inspections by Woodside Fire, if they could say, well, this is really our biggest concern about your property, and then this is our next. And that also gives people some guidance on how to focus, how to prioritize, how to allocate their for resources. And then if I could go back to this demonstration garden
Yeah.
again, I actually think that when people see what it looks like, it looks better than they might imagine their yard looking if they actually did all that stuff, right? People, I think, are responding to yards looking, and I don't want to say tidier, but in some sense, more sort of organized, I guess is a way to put it. And I think that, you know, you get an eye for it after a while. At least I hope I'm starting to get an eye for what that means.
Well, and then this goes back to something Dee talked about of actually having a demo where, you know, this is how you might install an ember resistant vent, or I keep pushing, you know, how do you make your wood deck safer, like with ember resistant mesh, and you know, there's techniques that can be very complicated to read about, and this is all part of wildfire preparedness communication, and it's part of a really big topic. There's so much to do. And right now, I want to bring it back to, and this is all part of what MJ and Dee are working on in their subcommittee about how do we communicate? What do we communicate? You know, is that a garden? Is that people going out to your home? Is that a demo of how to harden your home? Is that weekend workshops? Whatever that means, is it a newsletter? But so they are working on that, and we're going to get status. But back to this conversation, Serena, do you still have a comment?
I wanted to add one thing, that in terms of demonstration, the slides that MJ showed of new fence and her adjustments were a really excellent demonstration of it can still be gorgeous.
Thanks. Do you know anyone who's actually followed anything I've done? Well, thanks, Diane.
Yes, Craig. Oh, yes, Wanda, go ahead. Oh, okay. So do we, and Wanda, feel free to leave. Just take off if you need to leave. We have a quorum. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. So are we, I think we're getting close to the idea that we should go through these two ordinances and actually, except for you, Nona, and actually make comments. Do you want to do it like the safety element and then send me the comments and I'll incorporate them together and then put it in the packet for next month?
Sure.
Okay. Right.
This is going to be a little bit free ranging here on stuff. So the first thing I'd like to encourage is on the conservation subcommittee, you guys can always do a report out to the main committee, and that gets it into the agenda, like the super easy way. It doesn't mean that Don's agreed to it. You can just say, here's what we've talked to Don about, and he's, you know, thinking about whatever, but at least it gets it into public record. So I would encourage that. I think both committees might want to consider approving some kind of resolution that asks the council for permission to, you know, use PV Forum and the town communication. I mean, not just do it on this sort of personal, let's reach out to our friends and get comments, but that you should write up, this is what we would like to submit, and then let's get it out on all the communication channels we have to get feedback back to your committee.
It's because MJ writes the tips. She's going to probably use the tips to communicate. And then once we get Carrie and you to approve an email, we're going to put it on PD Ready. But do you have other?
Well, so the other thing you might consider is we could get the mayor to write a letter saying, hey, it's fire season and this is really important. And here are these new things coming up. And these two committees are reviewing this stuff and we really need your input as citizens. So I think we could potentially do it over and above the tips, which I think are great.
Is that something you can do for us since you're our council liaison?
Yeah, I need a request from you to do it, but yes, I think I could do that for you. Then the next thing is, I've talked to Don multiple times. He seems very open to the idea of a 5-year plan, and maybe it gets limited by dollars per year or, whatever. I mean, that there's something there. But what I would encourage is, I think people need to start thinking about writing some language. And it doesn't have to be legal language that a lawyer is going to, but like, what does it look like as an example? We think that in this ordinance, it should say, and the homeowner within 3 months, I'm making this up now, but the homeowner in 3 months can come up with a plan in consultation with blah, 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 that over the next 5 years commits to, and again, I don't want to get into the wording. I think you guys could do that, but I think that would be really useful because it gives us something concrete. The one thing I worry about is when we get into looking at the ordinance and going, well, on line 37, there should have been a comma here. We kind of lose the forest and the trees, because the forest here really is, what are the big ideas, and what would if you were to write down one of these big ideas, kind of what would it look like? And I think that would be helpful, because then I think that would give us something to work with Don on, to say, look, Don, this is you figure out with your attorney what the right legal language is, but this is what we're after. And I think that same thing is true with this sort of notion of combustibles. And, how do we say, we need a range of solutions here. And again, this is a little bit, off the top of my head, but I also think we should think about, how do you go about appealing this process? Whom do you appeal to? It seems like having to, because right now the fire marshal has a huge, almost all these things say at the fire marshal discretion. Right. So there's a huge amount of discretion. I think the problem is if you get the wrong inspector, so to speak, then what's your appeal process? And one thing I liked, and I don't know if Don would go for it, but if we could get the fire district to create a committee or empower some of our committees to say, here, if a homeowner could appeal to that body and they could review it, and then they could basically forward on a recommendation to the board. Because remember, the fire board is 3 people and they run it, they run way higher than the council. But I think those are ideas that you could think of. I think it could be really valuable. And I think having volunteers both in this appeal process and also just available to come out and say, of course, we'll just give you some free consulting because we love to be helpful. That part would be great.
I think that the citation ordinance already spells out the appeal process, so I don't think that we can modify the appeal process at this point.
I
don't know. I appreciate that comment.
Yeah.
Because I'm not satisfied with the wording.
I would try. None of these are, oh, I know the answer, and I'm just kind of giving you the secret code here. But I think Don I've had 2 conversations, particularly on your set of issues of, it could be $100,000 and demanding that it get done now, or we're going to fine you. I forget what it was, like $500 a day or $1,000. It's craziness, right? And so, yeah, if they went to the max on what they're allowed to do, it's completely unreasonable.
Right.
And even Don believes that. But when you say, but the ordinance says it, and that's what I keep going after is, Don, you need to write this ordinance so that it's in the ordinance that there is an appeal process, that in the ordinance you can have a plan. That's stuff which I think he believes in, but the ordinance doesn't say it.
Right.
And then the last thing I'd say is some of the fire safe stuff that you're talking about. My understanding is that that's only going to apply to the very high severity hazard zones and maybe high. So that's
What?
so some of the fire safe regulations. So some of this, the code that comes from CAL FIRE comes through fire safe. And I think some of that stuff is basically going to apply to the very high severity hazard zones and maybe high. I don't think I've seen it specifically.
Yeah,
And
right
MJ, you
now.
may know better than I do, but I don't, it's not a blanket like it applies to all, potentially, at least my understanding is, it doesn't necessarily apply to all houses in Portola Valley.
Yeah, right now it's for the very high, and,
Right.
but the thing is with the hazard map, we don't know if that's going to change, which
Right.
areas are very
And the
high.
element safety said, just go forward assuming that we're all fire. like we're all high sensitivity, right? Like back in whenever that was, September of last year.
Right, and that's where we're, like, we passed 7A, on the last round of this back in 2008, under the idea of, let's make the whole town safe. But, it's one thing to say, we're going to take the reasonable parts of these things and apply it to everybody.
Right.
Versus we're going to take the draconian parts of it and apply it to everybody. And my guess is if the draconian parts don't apply by law, then we don't have to apply those to everybody. So I don't know exactly how we'll sort this out, but I really would encourage you guys to start trying to write up something pretty explicit rather than just, Don, we're concerned that this might cost a lot of money. Let's go past that and say, Don, here are 3 different ways you could write an ordinance in lay language to get at this stuff. One could be a limit on the annual, one could be a total, you get the idea. So, okay, let me just see if I got anything else on here. Report out, council. Yep, I think that's it. And then this notion of combustible, sort of that kind of conflict. Somehow we got to get at that. And I think you guys are doing great in that regard. So thank you.
I will be writing up quite a bit on a 5-year plan because that's my hotspot. Also with the citation ordinance is the ordinance that gives the teeth to the other ordinances. And in that ordinance that's already been passed, it describes the appeal process. Okay. We could ask before it goes to citation, can a homeowner request a second inspector? We could say, but I think that puts the inspectors in an awkward spot. Okay, Serena, you got a question or comment?
Yeah, do we know when the new fire levels that Woodside Fire Protection was supposedly putting out a while ago, what the fire level status is for the various
fire
parts-
maps?
or the fire maps? Do we know when those are coming out?
Are you asking about the flame mapper project?
So I know the California law, as what I've read about it, it only applies to the very high hazard zones, as Greg said. The question is, what are the new zones for Portola Valley?
Right.
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet.
Do we
Yeah,
know? That was my question, as to whether we have an update on when we think those are going to come out.
Yeah, it's looking like next year for the LRA for towns and cities, because the one for the SRA for the state-owned
Right.
properties got pushed back. So they got into a second round of public comment, which is supposed to end in this month, actually. And after that, that'll take at least 2 months for them to resolve. And it's not until that's all done that they'll release the LRA stuff.
Okay,
So
thanks.
yeah, it's looking like 2024. Yeah, but the thing is with the question I had about the flame mapper project, the one that WFPD paid all this money for, which is apparently still alive. I think that the purpose of that project was to identify more areas in Portola Valley and the district that would be very high fire.
And I don't think we can have this discussion because that's not on our agenda item.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
okay,
true.
so yeah, if you want to stop, but
Yeah.
yeah, because
Yeah, that's a
there,
Brown Act
you could
violation.
bring it up at a different one and talk about flame mapper.
I would love it. That maybe we should add literally, and I'm serious, an item on our agenda, town council liaison report. So that you can, is that allowed? So that you can give us, because we don't have a town manager anymore, that can come. And I don't think the fire district is coming to our meetings anymore, even though I moved them to the top of the agenda so that they.
Okay, I'm willing to, we can try it. I mean, I'll check with the attorney, but I don't think there's any reason why I can't sort of at the end do like a a town manager report of sort of what's going on. So I'll check on that.
Yeah, I would
Um,
like that.
I also think, so there's a new, they are going to hire a new fire marshal. Don is retiring in
Again,
December.
we can't have this. I would love this.
Well, no,
status,
no,
but
it's,
not in
but
the
I,
agenda.
no, I don't want to get into the details of it. What I was going to say is, I think you need to explicitly invite them, not just put them on the agenda, but say, we're having this meeting. Here's what we want to talk about.
Craig,
Here's what
I
you.
could be, I
Yeah.
could not, unless I came down to the district and building and knocked on the door and carried somebody here. I have been very clear about the invitation. So
Okay, well, then,
they're busy. They're
okay.
just really busy.
all
That's
right,
why
well,
I'm
then
saying-
I'll talk to Don. Okay.
Okay, so let me tell you what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that MJ is going to focus on this effort to get feedback with her tips. I'm going to probably end up working with MJ to write an email that describes what these two ordinances are and the fact that we are going to be getting feedback, because I want to be very careful on how I want to be very neutral how I describe these two ordinances and very careful when I invite feedback. And then when we get that email approved by Carrie and Craig, I will, we'll send it through WPB Ready. We'll send it through various email chains. And then we'll also send a request to Craig saying to the town council, this is kind of the snapshot of what we're doing. Is there anything else you can do to help us gather feedback, whether it's having the mayor send an email or the town council talk about it? And then on the third is I'm going to send you an email probably tomorrow asking for your feedback, and we are, except for Nona. And you guys are going to basically spend the next couple weeks really going through the text and really thinking about very specific modifications we can suggest. I'm going to focus a lot in on this 5-year plan that I would like people to have. I'll probably try to do, I have a friend who's a real estate agent. I will try to pick her brain about the escrow issue. And
Put that on the agenda for next month? Have a realtor come
No,
in?
I'll pick her brain about how they could do it, whether it's possible. And then I'll summarize all of that. I think I probably need it. I'll give you a deadline, but I need to get the agenda out a week before. So probably I need 3 or 4 days to assemble it. So you'll probably have 2.5 weeks. And then, so for the next month, I'm hoping we have more. You're going to have hopefully status on 13/2023. And then we're going to have this assembled document. And hopefully we'll have some more feedback from people. So I think that agenda is pretty full. Don't you think?
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to take a vote on any of this. Do we? No? Okay. So that's the plan. Anyone else have any comments from attendees? Serena, thank you so much for all your really good comments. Please send an email to your friends and get them to attend and give great comments like you have. Anybody? Anything else? Okay. Then can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Want to do any of the rest of the agenda? then?
Oh, God. Forgot that it existed. Okay, conservation, so we're gonna close this out. Let's go to the next thing. Conservation Committee, do you have any updates?
No updates. And I'm actually going to leave in 5 minutes.
Yes,
so I just
okay.
wanna apologize
Home
ahead of
Hardening
time.
Vegetation Management Subcommittee, do you have an update?
Well, other than what we already discussed, just to let you know, we did work on a new subcommittee name and we didn't find one yet, but we came up with maybe something like PIA. Public information, something or
How about authority? Public Information Authority.
other. I don't know, we're still joking. about
Volunteer
it. Okay,
consultants.
yeah, okay, that's our report.
Okay. Finance and Insurance Subcommittee doesn't have anything. Okay, we have no staff updates. Is everybody going to be here next month?
Yes.
Okay, on September 20th. Okay.
Now motion to adjourn.
Oh, and actually,
Oh.
yeah, because the subcommittee and committee liaison updates, that doesn't include Craig. That's not the town. That actually shouldn't even be there. That was a duplication. I don't know. Okay, so motion, somebody give a motion to adjourn, second? Show of hands. Okay, pass. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jennifer.
That was B and Roland, your first and second.